Have you ever found yourself wishing for your own golden ticket to the chocolate factory? My name's Jessie, and today we are going to be doing a spoiler-free review for The Wishing Game. This is not my typical read. It is not fantasy. It is not a series. So definitely a little outside my norm. But y'all, I had the best time with it. And I am going to tell you all about it. The Wishing Game is a standalone contemporary by Meg Shaffer, but there is just enough magical feeling to make it perfect for a fantasy reader like me. As someone who grew up absolutely loving like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and just loving that and like children's books and just that whimsical feeling, I think that this book is just adorable and glorious and something that I didn't know that I wanted in my life until I read it. I ended up getting this arc off of NetGalley, so thank you so much. I'm very excited and I plowed right through it. I read this in such a short amount of time because it just hooked me and it kept me going, and it was a nice little break from my typical large epic fantasy reads. In The Wishing Game, we are following Lucy, and Lucy is a teacher's aide in California, and she's barely scraping it by. We all know teacher salaries, paraprofessionals and teacher's aides get paid even less. So we know she is on the struggle bus. She's so sweet though, and she really cares about these kids that she's, in the class for. She is especially close with this one little boy named Christopher. Christopher was in her class, and at one point she kind of really bonded with him. He went through a very traumatic experience, losing both of his parents, and is currently in foster care. And her goal in life at this point is to foster and adopt Christopher. There is no other family, and he is just in the system, and she wants to have a life with him. She wants to be his mother. And I really enjoyed seeing that. But because of her financial situation and her living situation with roommates and not having steady, transportation, things like that, it's just not possible. So she's trying to figure out different ways to make more money and to, improve her status and be able to, get her own apartment and get a car and just these small things so she can take on this mother role for Christopher, who desperately needs it. Aside from Lucy, we are also following Hugo, and Hugo is a few years older than Lucy, and he is an artist, and he works as an illustrator for a children's book series written by Jack Masterson, who has written this prolific children's book series that absolutely everybody loves about this place called Clock Island and this mastermind, and the whole premise of these books is that they grant children wishes. And he is, very prolific. He's made a lot of money on it, but he is miserable. He actually lives on Clock Island with Jack Masterson. And Jack, the author of these books, has not written anything in years, and he has become a recluse, living on his private island that's very whimsical and very chocolate factory-esque. And it doesn't matter because his books still inspire children all these years later. And one day, Jack decides he's going to write again. So he writes and he finishes a new Clock Island book. And that is at the point where he puts out this message to the world that he has written this new book and that he will be holding a competition, and the people invited to compete will know. And those people will be basically competing to win one copy of this manuscript to do whatever they want with. And when Lucy receives her invitation, she knows that her life is about to change forever. This book gave me literally everything I wanted out of it. It was so much fun. I loved it. And there was a lot of things that I did love about it. Now that you know the synopsis of The Wishing Game, let's get into my actual thoughts on it. For one, we're going to talk about the characters. I loved them. I thought that most of them were very well done. We'll start with Lucy. I thought Lucy was a fantastic character. She was sweet and she just tried so hard, but she was also flawed and traumatized from a pretty traumatic childhood. And she just wanted to make the best life she could. And she fell in love with this little boy and wanted to adopt him. And as someone who, for one, has children of my own, but for two, has also worked with foster youth. I was a guardian ad litem and I worked with foster kids. So something about that just always hits me really hard because I've seen it. I've been there. I've been in the trenches. I've been in court cases. Like, it was, draining emotionally at times, but something that I thought was very, important for me to do at the time. So seeing that portrayed was fantastic, and just her love for him and, everything, and showing that it's not easy, but that when you work hard and, sometimes even when you work that hard, it's almost impossible to, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And, I really enjoyed that about her, but like, she never gave up. Because it's like everything kept knocking her down and knocking her down and knocking her down. And she never gave up. And I really liked that about her. She was definitely flawed. There were some things about her that I was like, girl, why? But I really thought that made her more human in the end. And then we have Hugo. And Hugo, like I said, is the artist. The awesome British artist who also has, a little bit of trauma in his past. He has a brother who passed away. He was from a single mother who was very poor. He got this opportunity when he was younger to be the illustrator for these books, and he took it and he, made his fortune, but that still didn't, save him from, being unhappy with a lot of things in life. And it didn't save his brother. And, it really goes to show you kind of, it's like, yeah, he has everything that everyone thinks that you would want, but he's still not happy. And he has stayed on Clock Island in order to take care of Jack, who has kind of spiraled in the years that he hasn't been writing for one reason or another. And Jack is another character that I thought was really well done. I loved him. And he is that eccentric Willy Wonka-esque older man who just loves children and wants to help them all. And you kind of find out that like you can't, because sometimes even with good intentions, things go awry. And at first you kind of feel like he's very superficial and weird and just this eccentric old man. And then you get more of his story and, why he is the way that he is and why he has gone into this downward spiral. And I think it really, again, humanizes him and makes his character that much more interesting to read about and just like heart-wrenching and, also heartwarming at times. So I really, really enjoyed those three kind of main characters. And then of course we have Christopher. And the thing I love most about Christopher is that he is written as a 7-year-old who reads like a 7-year-old. He reads like an actual child. And that is something that I've talked about before. I find that a lot of kids in books don't read like kids. Maybe that is like specific to fantasy, but I don't know. I find a lot of times it's like, oh, they're 7, but like they act like a teenager. And I'm like, that is not how children act. This is how a traumatized child who found both of his parents dead and is now in foster care would act. And I thought it was really well done. And I appreciated that because there's something I can say to like, I want my children in books to read like children. I don't want a 17-year-old coded 6-year-old. Like they don't talk like that. They don't act like that. And I think Meg Shaffer did a really good job of making the children children. And then we do have a couple of other kind of side characters in the book that I really did enjoy. The other competitors I thought were very interesting. And I thought that, you're at some point, you're kind of rooting for all of them. And it's just like, okay, well, like, now I kind of want all of them to win. Like, what am I feeling these things now? Aside from the characters, then we also have the plot. And the plot of this book is basically he has brought these 4 people, not Hugo, Hugo's already there. So he has brought these 4 children they're adults now, but they were at one point children that had made their way to Clock Island one way or another, and now they are coming back. He's bringing them back to compete for this manuscript. But this competition is really weird. A lot of it is answering riddles and figuring things out, and I really liked the riddles because they make sense. Once you know the answers, you're like, oh, it's not like a riddle that you see sometimes in books that you're like, that was really stupid. No, these were really cool. And I thought that was really well done. I really enjoyed seeing, you know, the competitors, and they weren't all sunshine and roses. Like, you of course have, like, you know, the one who's like super upset and, you know, trying to cheat or whatever, and, you know, those repercussions. But then you also have the others kind of coming together and feeling for each other because they're all there for their own reasons. And what I really liked the most about kind of that aspect with the competitors is all of them, other than Lucy, who's like we're mainly following, feels like they have their shit together, right? It's like, oh, one's a doctor, one's an entrepreneur, you know, one is a lawyer, and you feel like they all have their shit together, but then you kind of realize they don't all have their shit together. They all have something going on that they need to be there. They need help with. They need something. And it's really cool seeing that because I know in real life you look at people and you can look at other people from the outside and be like, well, they have everything together. They have everything. Why do I not have anything? But little do you know that they are also suffering in silence. They also have things going on. So I think that was a really poignant part of the book. And I don't think it was like a big plot point, but it was just something that I kind of noticed because you can be like, okay, well, like they seem like they have it all together, but they really don't. And that is true of real life, I think. And I really appreciated seeing that. There were a couple things, I guess, plot-wise that I didn't think made a whole lot of sense because, you know, as much as I loved this, no book is perfect. There were a couple things that had me scratching my head that were like, well, why didn't you just do this? And maybe it wasn't plot-wise. Maybe it was just like character-wise. I don't know. But like there were instances where I feel like Lucy specifically could have done things differently to meet her ends. But I also get why she didn't and didn't think of that. So like her whole motivation is to get to be able to adopt Christopher, which is beautiful. But she needed money, right? Well, there is a fledgling romance with her and Hugo got a lot of money. And you can tell they're flirty and, you know, he really seems to care about her and she starts to fall for him. And it's a really sweet romance. I really liked the romance in this book because it wasn't heavy, it wasn't heavy-handed, it's not smutty, which there were moments. There was one moment where I was like, but like we didn't get it. And I kind of was oddly wishing that we would have gotten like a little bit, but no, not at all. So keep that in mind. But there were moments where I'm like, you know, if you just, I'm sure he'd help you if you asked kind of thing. Like, cause they're starting to fall for each other. And she's like, no, I can't. I have to win this and be focused for Christopher. And it's like, you have this really rich man falling for you. And he says he wants to help you. He'd probably help you. But I get also why she wouldn't even consider that because she wants to do it on her own. She wants to not feel like she's indebted to someone else. So it does make sense, but it's still like, girl, he'd have helped you. Get the help, right? So that was the one thing that I was like, But, you know, it does make sense. But I was like, girl, just go for it. Just go for it. Just ask him. Just kiss him. Like, there were those moments. I thought the pacing was also very well done in this book. It never leaves you in those lulls, right? Like, sometimes you're like, all right, what's going to happen next? That never really happens. It is very well paced, very even paced. And I really appreciated that because I read it during my vacation and it was just a nice, good car ride book. Like I read it during the car ride in North Carolina and really thought that it just sucked me in and kept me wondering, and there were questions and I got the answers to all of my questions. So that was good because it is a standalone. So you want to make sure that all your points are tied up, all your P's and Q's, because this is it. And I thought it did that really, really well. I did have one, I guess, little annoyance with something about Lucy's character and her motivation and plot kind of development and her character development. And that is this animosity she has towards her sister, which is completely understandable because, like, her sister was the golden child, the favorite child. Her sister was a sick child. So her parents, like, really hovered her sister to the point where they sent Lucy to, like, live with their grandparents. They never loved her. It was really terrible. And the sister, like, really leaned into that, right? As a child. They hadn't spoken in many, many, many years. And Lucy never brought it upon herself to even try to contact her sister again. And while I can understand that, part of me was like, a lot of this could have sped right on up if you'd have just called your sister and y'all would have had this conversation that you had at the end of the book, at the beginning of the book. But then we went and had a book. So there's that. So she really does not want anything to do with her parents, obviously. Don't blame her there. Or with her sister. And that is like a big part of her like childhood trauma, is not being loved and things like that. But then by the end we kind of see like, she was raised by her grandparents and they did love her. So she does know how to love, and that's how she, knows how to be a mother to Christopher, which we all know I love seeing a mom in a book. Specifically in fantasy, and this isn't fantasy, but it's whimsical enough to feel fantastical, so I loved it. And yeah, so that was kind of my only like real gripe, was like, girl, call your sister and like hash it out. But I get why she didn't also, because she was kind of a stubborn character and she's like, no, I'm gonna do it on my own. And that being said, I just had the best time with this book. If you really enjoy competitions, if you really enjoy that whimsical middle grade feel, but for adults, I think you would like this one. If you were a big old fan of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I think you'd like this one. If you want kind of a elevated adult version of, oh my God, I got my golden ticket, you'll like this one. I just really think that even for fantasy readers, it's a really cool contemporary that a lot of people can get into, whether they typically read contemporaries or not. Like, there's no magic, there's no dragons, there's no space, but it is still one that I felt like really calls to fantasy readers in a way, because of our love of the whimsical. And the books within the book, the Clock Tower books, are middle grade fantasy. So, I mean, that's something, right? And I also really liked the resolution. I think that the book resolved itself really well, and all of the characters kind of got what they deserved in one way or another. And the thing that I think I liked the most about the resolution is, just like with the books within the book, when you wish for something, you may not always get the wish that you thought you wanted. And that kind of is how it is in real life too, isn't it? We want something, this very specific something, and we wish for it, or we work for it, and we hope for it, and we end up getting something slightly different that we didn't even know we wanted, but accomplishes the same goal and then some. So that was something that I really enjoyed seeing, is like, the fact that it's like you have your wishes and you get your wishes granted, but they are not exactly what you went in there hoping for, what you went in there wanting. They're not exactly what you thought you needed, but they were in fact what you actually needed. Oh, and this book has a giant raven. Just thought I'd throw that out there. This book has a giant raven, and I am kind of obsessed with him. Overall, fantastic book. I highly recommend checking it out. If you're a fantasy reader, if you're not a fantasy reader, pick this one up, because I think it really kind of goes through the ringer. It broadens your horizons, and it's a good break between the high epic fantasies. So check this one out. I think it's really fun, it's sweet, it's good, and it's a standalone. So I liked it. If you read it, let me know what you think about it, because I haven't seen too terribly many people that I know that have read it. I know like one or two, so I would love to talk to you about, you know, what you thought, what your favorite part was, things like that. Yeah, leave it down below and let me know what you think. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. My name is Jessie, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.